there's a handful of really useful tricks that I want to show you in this exercise. What we're going to do is we're going to now grab the entire eye itself, and we're going to move it over to the right-hand side of our canvas, as I mentioned, and we're also going to duplicate it as well. But before we do that, I got to show you some neat techniques here. First of all, what I'd like you to do is zoom in on your eye, if you will. And what we need to do before we move it is we need to select it, right? In other words, said another way, we need to create a floating selection that we can then pull off of the background, pull off of the canvas, and move somewhere else on the canvas. As you can see, that's exactly what happened with our washer. We literally pulled him off the background and moved him somewhere else. And as a minor point of interest, notice that the area, the space that once occupied the washer is now filled with the default background color of white. So for our eye itself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to the elliptical marquee tool just by tapping the M key on my keyboard. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the whole shebang, the entire eye. And you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to purposefully create a bad selection. In other words, what I'm after here is, again, we have sort of a cylindrical object. So I'm trying to get the top of the cylinder. That's what I'm trying to select there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to purposefully create a poor selection, something like this. Now, don't forget, if you want, you can hold down Alt or Option and create your selection from the center, or you can use Shift or whatever you want, right? But I'm going to purposefully create a bad selection because I want to show you an incredibly handy command inside Photoshop. I use this all the time. Before this command came along, by the way, we would spend infinite amounts of time trying to get the perfect selection inside Photoshop, and it's just this process of trial and error. Nope, didn't get it. Try again. Nope, didn't get it. Hold down spacebar. Did I get it? Nope, didn't get it. You know what I mean? Okay, go ahead and create your selection. And then head up to your select menu up at the top, and then check this out. We have a command called transform selection. Go ahead and choose that guy. And what happens is our ellipse, our oval of marching ants, gets enclosed inside this frame, and this frame almost looks like the crop frame. But in any regard, we have these resize handles that appear on the top and bottom, left and right, and also in all four corners as well. And as a matter of fact, I can bring my cursor inside this frame and drag my selection around to try and position it. So in other words, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wind up doing, something like this. Scale the selection out to the edges. Again, it's the top edge of the cylinder that I'm after, or the top side, I guess you could say, of the cylinder. Something like this, right? So again, I'm really not even concerned about getting that initial selection absolutely perfect. Sometimes I'll try, but, just to see if I still have it, that kind of thing. But again, it's not absolutely perfect, but, we could be here all day creating perfect selections. How do I get rid of the frame and apply the transformation that I've created? I'm simply going to hit Enter on my keyboard, or you could double click inside the transformation frame if you wanted to as well. Now, what we could do if we really wanted to is we could try and grab the rest of this cylinder. If you'll recall, Shift adds to a selection. So maybe what I could do is I could hold down Shift and maybe bring my cursor up here somewhere and then try and drag out to grab, part of this extra piece here, this extra sort of the depth of the cylinder, if you will. Now, this is not easy work. This is tricky stuff. So what I might wind up doing, I'm going to show you a neat trick here, is there we go. I don't have the entire sort of height of the cylinder, but I'm going to grab what I can anyway. And then that piece of the selection gets added to the overall selection, right? And then what I'm going to do, I'm still holding down Shift, is maybe I'll come along and I'll just sort of start grabbing little bits of the rest of the cylinder. This is certainly one way to do it, right? All the way along, kind of grabbing all these little bits. Now this can be, I should say, tedious work. I mean, we still have some stuff over here to grab as well. But anyway, it depends on how far we want to go with this stuff. I mean, you might be sitting there going, you know what? I can't be bothered. This is a little bit too much for me. Myself, I'm just holding down Shift and creating these little ellipses all the way around to try and grab most of the depth of the cylinder, maybe something like this. Now, I should mention as well that there are easier ways to do this. This is sort of the quick, down and dirty way to do it. But anyway, I think I'm going to leave it there. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out, Controller Command 0. There's my marching ants way up in the top left corner. I'm going to hold down the V key, or I'm going to tap my V key, I should say, to flip over to the Move tool. Grab this entire guy, click and drag him out over to the right-hand side of the canvas, something like this. So we just pulled this selection off of the background and dropped him somewhere else. Now, I mentioned that I wanted to show you how to duplicate as well. We're going to duplicate this selection, this eyeball object. So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option on my keyboard. I'm still on the Move tool. And then what I'll do is I'll click and drag on my selection, and that will create a duplicate of my selection, something like this. And while I still have the floating selection there, the marching ants, I can position the selection. I'm just using the arrow keys on my keyboard, by the way, the north, south, east, and west arrow keys to micro position my selection, my marching ants. So maybe something like, well, maybe in there somewhere. Okay, perfect. When I'm happy, go ahead and deselect, Control or Command D.